The book I am reading is The Inflamed Mind, a radical new approach to depression by Edward Bulmore. In the book, it illustrates depression's connection to vaccines, genetics, chemical imbalances, but mainly emphasizes inflammation of the body and mind, which causes depression. Although the evidence is compelling, there is other evidence in the book that counter what is stated, which makes the author questionable in some aspects because he contradicts himself. While doing a little bit more research, I did a survey, and I learned that most of the people who took the survey believe that depression was due to a traumatic event that happened in their life and not inflammation that led to their depression, but the personal trauma or life experience that led to it, which I personally agree because I have depression. I've dealt with depression, and it was not due to inflammation that I know of. Instead, it was because of a traumatic event that happened to me. And I've seen it with other people. It's moments that become huge. Something I read in an article is how depression does not equal inflammation, but there is a connection, especially with older people who deal with chronic pain. But that does not mean they're depressed. Yes, it can lead to depression because they do not want to do things after a certain amount of time because of the pain, but it does not mean depression is what caused it, or the pain is what caused depression. It's just the factors that lead up to that moment. In another article, it emphasized how depression is correlated to traumatic events in life, which I agree with.
Hi everyone, my name is Crystal Rosas, and the book that I chose is Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson. And in the book, he pretty much discusses past and current racism in society and how it has not progressed over centuries and how it's pretty much stayed the same, and also that it pretty much will not get better, especially with the current leader that we have and the office that we're being run by. So he discusses all these arguments through personal experiences and his family and things he's just observed over time in our society. The author's arguments and supporting facts are valid, and he does use some statistics to prove his points. But I do believe that there can be some gender bias in his personal experiences that he uses to support his arguments, just because he's an African American male, and it's been proven that males of African American descent have more stereotypes to them, so they can be sometimes labeled as dangerous or aggressive. So maybe his experiences were a little bit more emphasized just because of that factor. But other than that, I feel like his arguments were proven and they were very valid. To conclude, I agree with the author's central argument that racism has not gotten better over time and most likely will not, due to the current leader that we have and the government we're being run by. Some of the reasons I agree with the author is because of personal experiences. I am not of African descent, but I am Mexican, and so is my family, and I have witnessed and experienced them being discriminated upon because either the color of their skin or the language they speak or the accent that they may have. I was discussing this with some of my peers, and one of the questions that I asked was, do you believe that Donald Trump has reinforced white supremacy? And one thing that we discussed was that yes, he has, because some of the comments that he makes in his tweets or the things that he says in his speeches has given racist people maybe more confidence and has made it seem almost okay to discriminate or make people feel bad for the color of their skin, or like I said, the language that they speak or where they're from. So yeah, thank you for listening and have a great day.
Hey everyone, this is Consuelo. For my essay, I chose the book Being Immortal by Atal Gawande. For this essay, I was required to give a summary of the book, decide if the author was biased or non-biased, and finally decide to what extent I agree with the author's argument. To summarize my book, Atal Gawande first begins by introducing different elderly people he crossed paths with in his life and how they lived their everyday life. He then explains how each one of them developed different health conditions and how that changed their life because they had to now rely on family, nurses, or a hospice. Atal points out the fact that no matter who they rely on, they are medicated and treated the same. Atal makes two central arguments. The first being that now elderly people take many different medications, a few pills for every symptom, even when the symptoms are something that can be treated differently. And instead, we should be encouraging them to change their lifestyle to help better them. Now, if they say they feel lonely or depressed, doctors will prescribe them a pill and say, "Here, take this." They could recommend getting out and socializing more, and if that's not possible, maybe a pet to have company, not just, "Oh, take this pill." His second argument is that people need to learn to have the conversations with their loved ones to decide when it is time to stop undergoing treatments and just enjoy the life they have left. Because if not, they are forced to keep undergoing treatments and keep fighting even when they are tired and just want to live out the life that they have left. I don't believe Gawande is biased because he has personally experienced it. His profession as a doctor helps him get more insight, and he has done extensive research and seen the differences his ideas could make, as well as he provides many different examples and perspectives on the topic besides that of just his own. I agree with the
Greetings, salutations. So for my second research project, after having critically reviewed Triggered How the Left Thrives on Hate and Wants to Silence Us by Donald J. Trump Jr., I was required to write a paper comparing his central arguments to that of my own, 6 of my peers, and 3 experts. So this paper was broken down into 4 parts, the first part being the central arguments made. One of the first arguments that he brings up and makes is that the left has a victim complex, which is essentially people who make themselves look like the victim for sympathy or personal gain. As well as the second argument that he makes is that the left are trying to destroy America using bullying and name calling and other things like that. So for my second part of the paper, it's a summary in which I bring up a few topics that he brings up. The first topic would be shadow banning. It's where a creator's content is blocked or not shown on the feed or is unable to be searched. And he claims that it can hurt a political candidate. He also brings up political correctness. So an example of a word that wouldn't be politically correct would be whitewash because it has the word white in it. Another example would be sitting Indian style. So basically words that others might find offensive even if you don't find them offensive. Lastly, he talks about victimization. He's really big on victimization, and he really feels that that the left use this as a tactic to bring down America and essentially to win. So for the third part of my paper, it's an analysis in which I take a few of his quotes and use them to see if he's fair or unfair, biased or unbiased, in which I found that he was somewhat biased, but not totally biased. And I came to that conclusion because looking at his writing and his quotes and all of that, I found that he failed to provide various viewpoints on things that there should be various viewpoints on, as well as overgeneralization. But he does balance that out with clearly defining words that he uses interchangeably. For example, he clearly states in the beginning of the book that he uses the word Democrats interchangeably with the word left, lefty, and leftist, and clearly states that although he does this, not all Democrats are leftists. So that kind of makes it a little bit more fair in a way. And the fourth part of my paper is a survey in which I designed 6 questions based off his central arguments and asked 6 of my peers, to which I found that there was many mixed responses. A lot of them were in the middle. Some of them were leaning towards the ideas and arguments presented in this book, while others were leaning towards other ideas and arguments not presented in this book. For me personally, I found myself in the middle.
Hello, my name is Indira Islas, and my book was about the topic of abortion. This book was written with both the author's voice and the testimonies of real women who had to make the decision of whether or not to terminate their pregnancy. They faced many difficulties and were encountered with doubts and roadblocks throughout the process. Some of the main points that were covered were that women were not supported by their parents, their significant others, and sometimes even both. They didn't have the money to go to a clinic, and in one case, the woman performed her own abortion and died. The decision was overall affected by the social views in the 50s. The argument for this book wasn't very well stated, but the general idea that I got from reading it was that abortion is the right of the woman, but it is commonly judged upon by society for a variety of reasons.